Good evening. Before we start tonight's program, this is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to physical health, addiction, and a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and/or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health or addiction, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and it's a confidential free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. You can also text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And then we'd be remiss in doing a disclaimer without talking about something that's been paramount in my mind this year and over the last 10 and 11 years, in that of multiple sclerosis and demyelination. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. Thank you to all of you who have donated money to this amazing organization. It touches me and over the 1 million people in this country that have multiple sclerosis in so many ways. And I appreciate all of you. And on that, let's begin. Tonight we talk about this device again. We talk about the treadmill. But moreover, what walking and moving for 10,000 steps, or having 10,000 steps worth of physical activity, can mean for our overall health. We'll talk about what the experts are saying, but I'll also talk about what it has meant for me in the last 6 months. Because this is the venture forward. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, compulsive gambling, and alcoholism. And I think the reason why I paused for a second is because I have gone through so many portions of this battle over the last 3 years. And every now and then I am stuck in thinking about everything that has happened previously, but also I'm so proud of where I've come in this journey. And I gotta be honest, I can't be able to sit here and have all those tally marks and the days on that board without the love, support, and strength of all of you. And I want to start off by just saying that. It is a difficult journey, but we got each other. We absolutely got each other. And I want to say hello to all of you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch tonight. Who wins the door prize? That is going to be Jamie Rose saying hi, everyone. Hi, Jamie. Hope you're doing well this evening. We also have Marilyn on YouTube who says, hi there, JV. Hope you're doing well. I am doing well. It's been a long week, but I'm doing the best I can. And I think in the grand scheme of things, that's all we can ask for is doing the best we can. So I'm doing the best I can. And I hope you're doing the best you can too, Marilyn. We got Rich Vibes. How you doing? Great shows on Sunday. Rich, you're a phenomenal DJ and you put on a great live stream, and definitely go see Rich's work over on SoundCloud. He is phenomenal. To that point, Jamie says, Rich, I listened to your show in replay. It was great. Got a few new favorite shows from it I haven't heard from before. See? He's introducing people to music they haven't heard before. Rich has a really great show on Sundays. Definitely take a listen for it for sure. And we got Sue on YouTube that says, hi, everyone. Hi, Sue. Hope you're having a wonderful evening tonight. So, 10,000 steps. Where did that come from? Why 10,000? Why not 9,000? Why not 11,000? Why 10,000? Is there a rhyme or reason to it? How did it come about? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight. But moreover, we're going to talk about what this journey, as far as walking and physical activity, has meant to me in the last 6 to 8 months. Without that, I wouldn't have the dramatic sort of downturn, positive, obviously, dramatic sort of results that I've had in the last 6 to 8 months. It has been absolutely phenomenal. Let me go off to the right here and start talking about this, the case for 10,000 steps. You think about it, one's personal fitness, one's physical fitness is definitely as individual as we all are. What is good for one person may not be good for the next person. However, your body has a way of talking to you. Your body has a way of telling you this is the right thing to do, this is not the right thing to do. Without those sort of internal mechanisms, we'd be far off the course. It's sort of like when you ate too much on Thanksgiving and you're sitting on the couch watching football and you're saying to yourself, oh boy, I shouldn't have done that. That's your body talking to you saying, this is something that's a little bit out of the normal. The same is true with physical activity. The same is true for a lot of different facets to our life and the things that we do in this life. So when our body starts talking to us and telling us, hey, it's time to do something about it, more times than not, it's time to do something about it. So with respect to me, what does that mean? Well, tonight we're going to talk about the weight story because we can't talk about the step story unless talking about the weight story and the fact that I've lost 310 pounds in nearly 3 years. We start there. Then we talk about the steps. And then moreover, why 10,000 steps? Why 10,000 steps, but then also why physical activity? And the two, actually all three of them go hand in hand. But we have to be cognizant of the littlest things we can do as far as moving that needle forward, as far as our physical health, as far as getting out and doing things. Or as I've been told, and I've been telling people, always keep moving. In the back of my mind, I think, well, I should keep moving. And that's what we do. That's one way to ensure that we are getting the amount of physical activity we need. And as always, I'm going to take your questions and comments as we go forward with this. So the weight story. I've been tracking food for the last 1,027 days. I am down 310 pounds. And as I alluded to the last time we talked about this, I will continue to track food as we proceed on to the next phase, which would be muscle building and running. The muscle build has been dramatically noticeable within the last month. And that's just really putting the time in at the gym, but also taking care of myself from a nutrient sort of perspective. Macronutrients, watching my protein count, having a lot more protein than I have. We've talked about previously on the show how 100 grams of protein was a very much a hallmark as far as the weight loss journey, and now how dramatic that number goes up to 175, 200, 225. Again, each person's different, depends on your body characteristics and whatnot. But the rules of intake change somewhat when you're looking to build muscle now and not necessarily drop weight. So that's been a story. Physical activity, I would say, as I grew more capable. So certainly at 480 pounds, it's very hard to walk more than 5 or 10 feet without needing to sit. Within the year of 2019, I was moving around a bit more, but I wasn't on any sort of dedicated course to track steps. In 2020, we all know about, the Backstreet Boys reunion tour, right? And the pandemic. It's, not going to be cute about it. The pandemic definitely put a curveball into many things, but I think it also made us realize, hey, there are things we can do even in our own home that is not basically requisite of a gym to do what we have to do. And then we take the story into 2021 and realizing, the only way I'm going to get to my goal is really taking that to the next level. But oh my God, I actually have energy to do that. And I am not winded after walking 5-10 feet. I can actually walk a considerable distance. And if I could walk a considerable distance, I could do other things over a considerable distance. So that kind of builds on top of each other, right? We're going to go through some numbers briefly that talk about how the walking story, the step story, wasn't much of a gameplay here until the last 6 to 8 months of this year. But before I do that, let's look at some of your comments. In that we have All Things YouTube, which would be my co-host on VF Talks Friday night. Matt Haas says, hello. Matt, how are you tonight? Hope you're doing well. Jamie's got it right. She says, let's get to stepping. Whoa, yeah, let's get to stepping indeed. But what you find is we do more than that. I think in my case, it's been stepping and going on the elliptical and rowing and spinning and doing all of that. So when you have enough energy to do it, you kind of do as much as you can. And again, not a doctor, not a physician, not a dietitian, all that. That sort of disclaimer again. But you do what your body feels and always have the guidance of a doctor, for sure. Rich says, JV, so inspiring, my man. Rich, thank you. Appreciate that big time. And Matt asks the question. He says, tacos are part of weight loss, right? Right? Sure. Everything in moderation, Matt. And, you'd think I'd be the one saying, well, you should really put Beyond Meat or Impossible Meat in there. No, everything in moderation. Everything in moderation and enjoy it, right? My only rule is if you consume something when you're in the weight loss phase or even the muscle building phases, you track it to some degree. You keep yourself honest, and you keep yourself accountable. That's the only thing I say. But tacos are definitely part of it. Jamie says, dude, rowing is hard to get the hang of. Tried it at the gym the other day, and it's hard. Yeah, the first couple times you row, don't expect to go fast at all. I would think just trying to get the right motion to try to get, stroke and get the 7 or 8 meters and the next 7, 8 meters, so on and so forth. It is definitely hard in the beginning, but the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. So keep on at it. You'll find that it is a great workout for your upper body as well. Mark says, I think exercise is massive and recovery always feels good coming out of the gym after a good session. Yeah. It goes back to something we've talked about on the show before, in that of turning a firefighter into a manager. We think about addiction, whether it's alcoholism or what have you, being a firefighter. It's filling in the gaps of things that have harmed us or various parts of us. Taking something like exercise and weight loss and turning that into a beneficial or benevolent sort of behavior is definitely part of the story. And you wouldn't be far off in saying that. You'll find that a lot of people that do recovery groups will also talk about their dietary or physical sort of renaissance, if you will. I'll basically mention him real quickly, in FLT Weaver and his wife Felice. I mean, he has become very regimented as far as working out and whatnot. But then so is another person I'll throw in the mix is Sober James. He was definitely very much into physical fitness because it acted as a manager to replace the firefighting of whatever addiction held us back. So realize that anything that's a benevolent activity, benevolent sort of thing, can quickly become a firefighter if we overdo it. And that goes back to listening to your body. Always listen to your body. And if you think you're doing too much, you should talk to your PCP or your dietitian or your nutritionist or your trainer and have them weigh in on what you're trying to do. And to always get a second or third level of discourse, second or third sort of set of eyes on what you're doing is always beneficial, because that's how we grow, right? You don't write a book report based on reading or coming up with one opinion. You don't write a research paper based on one book. That's why I was trying to say it the first time. You use a consortium of different sources, 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever. It just makes it more reactive, more representative of different opinions, but also different historical viewpoints. In this case, different sort of tactics we could use from physical fitness, from physiology, that sort of thing. So I put together a few slides that talk about the weight loss, but the number of steps I've made in the years of this journey. So we go back to 2019. If you take in the first 6 months where I really wasn't in hyperdrive as far as the weight loss routine was, still drinking until May of that year, I wasn't having a lot of steps. It was well under 5,000. The average for 2019 was 2,644. And my average weight in the year of 2019, because you have to include the beginning of that year, was 414, a little over 414. As we go to 2020, the year that people are afraid to mention, you see the bulk of the weight loss there. I start from going into the lower threes all the way down to 240 to 220 at the end of 2020. And that wasn't using any sort of weight loss routine. There was not as many steps. Again, well under 5,000. Had an average of 2,469. So again, the physical fitness element wasn't part of the diet journey until this year. We go turning the clock to May, and you could see the number of steps growing very large, right? So we go to nearly 8,000 to 9,000 steps in May. In June, we're coming close to 10,000 steps. By July, it becomes standard practice to be over 10,000 steps on average. So the daily average for this year is 9,130 steps. That was coming from a place where I was doing 2,469 steps. I nearly quadrupled it. And then if we talk about the last 6 months in particular, I'm averaging 13,736 steps, with some days at 20,000, some days below 20,000. I try to average between 13 to 16,000 a day. And if you look at the left-hand side on what the weight loss has been since June, which was another 30 pounds, you could tell that you could see what the physical activity has done to this journey. It has basically taken this journey and taken it to the next level and then some. And go back to Maine for a minute. it's one thing to say that physical fitness has to come right out of the gate when you start any sort of diet routine. And a lot of dietitians, a lot of nutritionists, a lot of trainers will say that. However, the first thing you have to address, as I've alluded to on this show before, is this guy up here. Is your mind, is your brain, is how you process things. It's sort of the internal thinking that goes on that forces you to eat, that forces you to drink, that forces you to do all those things because it's fighting a fire. So addressing that first is probably the most paramount thing you could do in all of this. When you have that figured out, if you figure out the things that are in your way and basically dealing yourself a new hand or wiping the slate clear, whatever sort of adage you want to use here, you're starting the process to making things better. But it takes time, and it doesn't happen in a day, and it doesn't happen in a week, and it doesn't happen in a month. In my case, it happens over time, over 3 years' time. But it continues to be a thing where you stay true to yourself and you realize that what you're doing now is more important than what you were doing to hurt yourself previously. And when you make that sort of connection, things become easier. At times, we think about those lows that we've talked about on the show before. When I think about 480-pound JV, I think about someone who could barely walk 5 to 10 feet and is basically having a nervous breakdown in the middle of an airport. When I think about the alcoholic, I think about the one that will drink pitcher upon pitcher of jalapeno cucumber margaritas and then go home and drink scotch and drink other things and then have a reversal of fortune at 3:45 in the morning. Not related to the two, but talking about the mind for a second, you're talking about someone who also looked to gambling to use as a firefighter because this person did not have a good way of managing those gaps. When you address the things that are going on upstairs, you start the process for a better life. Some comments. Rich says 2020 never happened. Yeah, I think some people would be quick to say that. Without 2020, though, I don't think I would have the formulative weight loss that I've had in this journey. So 2020 absolutely did happen. But 2020 also got me in touch with some incredible people, and that of all of you. So I'm very thankful for that. Jamie says, look at that increase. Yeah. The increase in the number of steps in the physical activity has been something that I don't know where I'd be without it, for sure. Rich says, to be honest, neither has 2021. This world that we live in ever since January, February of 2020 has been a different one. And dealing with the nuances of what we deal with now still takes time. Rich, I get what you're saying by that, and I'll say quickly that my thoughts are with you, for sure. Absolutely. 2021, the same as 2020 in the sense that we're still trying to figure out what that, and I hate saying this phrase, what that new normal is. I think we'll always be looking at a new normal as we go forward here. Jamie says, for real, Rich, I have no idea where these 2 years have gone either. Yeah, for sure. Mark says, it's amazing how our bodies are so adaptive to change, especially when exercise, the more you do it. Yeah. They say 21 days in a row, 28 days in a row of any sort of positive behavior, and the body takes to it like it becomes part of the routine. And that's always subject to change. You're talking to someone who has now dropped the weight for the third time. So I never say that that's a guarantee. However, the more you do something, the better off you are. And Jamie says, yeah, Mark, you can literally change your DNA with exercise and diet. That is absolutely the God's honest truth. That is absolutely spot on. But we have to be careful not to be lured or lulled into the things that got us down those roads in the first place. In my case, overeating, obesity, that sort of thing. I think I still look at that as the paramount one for everything. I have a good control on the food. I have a good chance of having a good control on many other things. The moment that's not in play, the moment that I'm making a pass on these sort of very important constructs, these very important edicts, that's when things can get really dicey. So we must stay true to ourselves. Rich says, in respects to that and with what you are inspiring, my venture starts now. Rich, if you ever need support, you know where to turn. You have a community here that will take this on and help you every step of the way. So Rich, you're in good company here, especially in that of me. So don't hesitate. If you have any questions or you want some advice, you know you could turn to me for sure. Easy on YouTube says, good afternoon to you, sir, on this wonderful Friday afternoon over by you. And Mark says, has anyone had any experiences with the keto diet? Yes and no. I use keto as a jumpstart. I use a high protein diet, 100 grams or more of protein, 100 grams or less of net carbs, 40 grams or less of sugar. As basically the sort of guidelines that I use to start down this road. But there are other important things to say, and this is going to come controversial to some. I still think that there are some very beneficial uses of carbohydrates, in that of vegetables, in that of fruit. I would say those that are positive as far as the glycemic index should resonate to the top of that list. But I am not necessarily for a full-fledged keto. For some, it works miraculous results, and I will use the same sort of advice I gave before. Make sure you're working with a doctor or a nutritionist or a dietitian to give you a second or third set of eyes to make sure you're doing the right thing. But yes, absolutely. Some comments. Easy says he's lost 19 kilo on the keto diet. Easy, congratulations, way to go. Keep up the great work. Matt says, I'm on keto, but I'm not very good at it. Again, it's about tracking. Tracking is most important. And here's a very important thing to say. Even when you're on a keto-based diet, you still have to track everything. You may not be gravitating to the caloric count per se. You may be gravitating to the protein versus the carbohydrates versus the sugar. The macronutrients become very important in a keto diet. But you still have to track. Because our body got used to one way of living, one sort of relationship with food, which may have not been the most healthy relationship, and trying to conform to a new standard to make sure we're doing a more healthier thing for us. Jamie says, I think keto is good in the beginning, but not in the long run. Anyway, yes, I absolutely agree, Jamie, for sure. Rich says, I appreciate what you just said about flicking the switch in your head. What you do now is better than what negatively you were doing yesterday. Yes. And I think, we talk about the difference between anxiety and depression. Depression is the doldrums of the past. Anxiety is fear of the future. Neither of which are good behaviors. If we have a better control on how we perceive the future, which is not a guarantee, versus how we perceive the past, we should learn but never dwell, versus how we are acting and living in the present, that is very important in this sort of foundation. We must have a good relationship with all of that. Easy says, but relapsed for the past couple days and gained about 2 kilos. I can't go back to eating carbs at all. There you go. Your body's telling you, easy, you can't eat the carbs. So your body is communicating with you. Listen to it. Your body usually has ways of telling you whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. But no matter what you're doing, Easy, keep up the great work. Definitely keep up the great work. Mark says, I'm just eating what I can when I can to pile weight, to try and turn to muscle. Not the best way of going about it, but we will see if it works. Yes. And I will say that if you could be a bit more choiceful in what you eat, when you start getting into deeper weight training, it doesn't hurt. There are going to be some days of the week where you're looking for lean proteins. Definitely go for those. But I will say, I will use the mechanism that my friend Stephanie Westchester uses, in that of a food Sabbath. There should be a meal or even a day where you let yourself relax a bit. But again, as I go back to what I've told you before, track everything. No matter how off it may be, track it. It's staying true to yourself. It's staying honest to yourself, for sure. Mark says, I find it hard to gain large amounts of weight. Yeah, It's not an easy thing. It becomes almost as hard a process as dropping large amounts of weight, because again, you're asking your body to do something now that is different than what it is used to. And you're saying, well, if you were morbidly obese, and I'm talking about me, of course, when you were morbidly obese before, shouldn't it be easy to start eating lots and lots of food? It's not. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And I'm still tracking everything, but there are days where I'm still at about 1900 to 2400 calories where I should really be at 3K, especially on days I'm working out. So to change my mindset, to do the right thing, is very important. I will tell you another thing. I've had at least 6 people tell me in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, don't lose another pound. And I get where they're coming from. It's not like I'm intentionally trying to lose weight here. But it's not my intent right now to lose more weight. My intent now is to build more muscle, drop the remaining body fat that's on its body. Not all of it, of course, but I'm at 13.5, which is a really good number. If I can get it to 12, fantastic. If I can get it to 10, well, darn, I'm an athlete by now, aren't I? So, it's staying true to myself, but also realizing that, hey, now you're going way too much in the other direction. You got to keep the train on the track, so to speak. I'll bring up Easy's comment. I don't have depression or anxiety because every morning when I wake up and I sometimes say out loud, bring it on. You kind of censored yourself in the comments, so I censored it for you. But yeah, personal outages to rile yourself up to get yourself motivated, that's fantastic. That's what you should do. I try to do that most mornings myself, especially when I'm driving to the gym at 5 in the morning. Easy also says, my experience is this: depression stole my time away being in a dark, low place. Anxiety kicks my focus out about building better tomorrows. Spot on. Absolutely spot on. There's no room for anxiety. There is no room for depression. We learn from the past. We never dwell upon it. And as far as anxiety for the future, you don't know what tomorrow is. Live for today. Live it in now. It's the best thing you can do. So that's what the step versus weight picture looks like over time. But let's look at what the Centers for Disease Control say about physical activity and weight loss, because they have some very choice words. In that, one, the burning of calories through physical activity combining with reducing the number of calories you eat creates a caloric deficit that results in weight loss. We've talked about that. We've talked about using things like MyFitnessPal or Lose It or Weight Watchers even to track those sort of things and going for a deficit. Because if you're going under 3,500 calories, so to speak, or plus or minus a small delta, you are basically consuming less than what your body's burning. There's the calorie deficit. You're standing to lose weight. CDC continues to say that most weight loss occurs because of decreased caloric intake. However, evidence shows the only way to maintain weight loss is to be engaged in regular physical activity. Well, what's some of the physical activity you know about? Walking, moving. Always keep moving. And then you start thinking about 10,000 steps. You start thinking about things that you can do that you know that you're moving more than you did in the past. If you're sedentary, and certainly you look at those step charts, I was very sedentary even in the beginning of this weight loss journey. When I started stepping up my, no pun intended, when I started upping my step increase and moving around more, the weight started coming off more because I was burning more through physical activity. Easy has a question. Why is it when I get protein, I drop weight like pulling it off of sludge and throw it away, but when I eat one day of carbs, it likes to hang around? I can lose quick, but gain weight quicker. My question for you is, what sort of physical activity were you having the day that you're having the carbs? And also realize that there might be things that you're consuming with the carbs that may cause bloat. And bloat is a very difficult thing to talk about because the things that we eat that may be salty, that may have too much dairy, that may be inflammatories, will cause bloat. So be very cognizant about what sort of carbs you're eating and realize that there will be a 2 to 3 day delta if it's very intense as far as salt or as far as inflammatories like dairy and whatnot. Jamie says, I feel like carbs do things to the blood sugar that inevitably turn the fat faster. Yes, it also lures us to eat more as well. The addiction, especially when we start talking about the problem known as sugar, can create major havoc. I would say if you're leaning towards sugar, try to find the most natural sugar you can find. Fruits that are, glycemic index friendly are probably the best sort of sweets that you can have. I think when you start moving to a world where you're having sugar that you're putting in a cup of coffee, that's when it starts going off the rails. And we start talking about sodas, and then we start talking about fake sugars like sucralose and NutraSweet and that sort of thing. No, that's not good. It may not have any sort of caloric intake, but then there's a lot of chemicals that are underneath it that will lure you to have more and more of it, and that's not a good behavior either. Rich asks, what would you advise to start losing weight? Sedentary, what is an ideal goal to start with? I think looking at where you are weight-wise, figuring out what the most ideal weight is by using something like Lose It or MyFitnessPal, or just doing a straight calculation of BMR, basal metabolic rate, and figuring out what the ideal caloric intake should be is one way to find out. Now, if you calculate your BMR at, say, I'm just using this as an example, I don't know, 220 pounds, and you want to get down to 170, you realize that when you calculate the BMR, if you take 500 calories off of that number, you're gearing yourself up for 1 pound a week, because, as we said before, 3,500 calories roughly makes up a pound. So if you're looking to trim 500 calories off of a BMR, your basal metabolic rate, or even your energy expenditure, TDEE, we talked about this on a show previously, you're looking to lose about 1 pound. If you go to 1,000 calories, now you're looking at 2 pounds. And you can see the math from there. Again, there's debate as far as whether it's exactly 3,500 calories. I always say there's a plus or minus 10 to 12% based on the consumption and the kind of foods you eat. But 3,500 calories has always been the sort of gold standard on what we perceive a pound to be. Mark asks, is skipping meals completely unhealthy to reduce weight? It can be. Now, I'm not going to say anything wrong about metabolic fasting. I think that in itself has to be monitored for exactly how you're metabolically fasting as well. Unintended metabolic fasting is very dangerous. If you're going to do something where you're doing a 16-8, 16 hours of rest, 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of consumption, make sure you stick to the rules that you're going to guide by. Set those rules up so you understand exactly what those parameters are. Anytime you unintendedly do it, then you're just not eating, and you run into the problem of just now forming a life without eating, and then that could be very bad as far as your blood sugar. So be very careful as far as skipping meals, being very mindful and cognizant of how you do so, but then sticking to whatever program you're doing, 16-8, 24, whatever you talk about. The other thing you'll say is, what other people will tell you is, even on days where it's supposed to be a complete fast, you should consume a small amount to make sure you don't get into famine mode. That's another thought to think about. But again, it depends on how early in the cycle you're looking at. In my case, in the very beginning of this journey, there were days where I was only eating about 1,200 calories. And it wasn't every day, but it was 2 or 3 days a week the first month or so. And that got me instant drops. But any doctor will tell you it is not the most healthy thing to do. And again, not a dietitian, not a nutritionist, what have you. You should always be guided by those folks and do your research before you pick up anything. But there is something to say about caloric reduction. There's also something to be said about intermittent fasting, but do it wisely. Jamie says, rich little steps at a time. Start by reducing certain things completely, but cutting stuff out. Small exercise at first, too. Just start small. Yes. Start off small and then build upon it. But as Jamie said, start off small. There are some sort of dietary philosophies that say if you change just one behavior, that in itself can lead to so many good things. Then you wait a certain amount of time and then you switch another behavior. You may be saying to yourself, well, I don't want to drink soda anymore. Well, you start off with something that is within the ballpark. You take that off. You wait 3 weeks. And then you try something else on top of it. It's sort of like an elimination diet, but the other way. So you grasp one level. You can add another level once you've been content with how far you've gotten. Definitely something that is worth sort of thinking about. Going back to the slides. So what the CDC says about physical activity and weight loss is things that we have talked about on the show before. But there is a government organization basically professing that on their website. So there's something to be said about that. What I would also say is just how much physical activity. So now we talk about this. CDC has guidelines on this. They say work your way up to 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity or an equivalent mix of the two each week. They say strong scientific evidence shows that physical activity can help you maintain your weight over time. That is very much true. When you think about 150 minutes, you say, well, you should do 30 minutes a day. Well, that ends up being 210, but you listen to your body and listen to how good your body feels and just never overdo it. But yeah, it's a very good guideline. And for an organization like the CDC, a government organization like the CDC to say that, they're not far off at all. They continue to say you will need a high amount of physical activity unless you also adjust your diet and reduce the number of calories you're eating and drinking, which is spot on. You know, we talk about diets being the measure of calories in versus calories out. Well, if we use something like Lose It or MyFitnessPal, and we're very aware of what we're consuming, these sort of tools also have ways of capturing information from your watch or your Fitbit or your Garmin to figure out how active you were. So it makes that sort of difference. So you know exactly how negative the net is or how positive the net is and working from there. So the two work hand in hand for sure. Getting to and staying at a healthy weight requires both regular physical activity and a healthy eating plan. That is very much the truth. And I want to raise something I said on the show last week. It wasn't even, I think I said it on Recovering Addict, in fact. I said, you know, the first 3 years were one thing to drop 310 pounds. That's not where the challenge is. Now's the challenge. Trying to keep that weight off for 4 years, 5 years, forever is going to be the challenge. For two reasons. One, the CDC, in their own right, bringing up the graphic again, said it in their own verbiage. But the second thing is, I gained back this weight 3 times. I went from 425 to 185, 190, back to 440, down to 245, all the way to 480 is where we started back in January of 19, to now 170. So I know that you must stay committed in tracking what you're consuming and tracking what sort of physical activity you're doing. Because if you don't take care of yourself or you let the doldrums and you fall victim to the firefighters or whatever is causing you grief or stress or anxiety or depression, over time, it could be a major problem. So you stay true to yourself, you journal everything, you journal your food intake, you journal your exercise, and you stay true to yourself and stay accountable. That is the most important thing we could say, is accountability. We must be accountable to ourselves, both quantitatively, calories, protein, carbohydrates, blah, 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 but qualitatively as well. Journaling, meditation, therapy. It's the best thing we can do. So, where does the 10,000 steps come in? And I apologize for the eye exam that's off to my right here. I apologize. I think the key points are highlighted in yellow. But there was a doctor at the Harvard Tian Chan School of Public Health that said that 10,000 steps became a popular target in Japan in the 1960s. There was marketing campaigns around 10,000 steps. There was even a whole series of public service messages, but also advertising campaigns that talk to 10,000 steps. It's been something that's been around since 1964, in fact. They did an analysis. Is 10,000 steps the right thing? Can you do 4,000 steps? Can you do 8,000 steps? How about 12,000 steps? And they figured out that, is it the number of steps? Is it the cadence of the steps? Is it the step intensity? And what they found out was one simple thing. Well, actually, two simple things. That those that took 8,000 steps at the start of the study had about 50% lower risk of dying than any cause during the follow-up. 50%, 1 in 2. When we take that number and look at that as 12,000, now 3 times that 4,000, people who took 12,000 steps a day had a 65% lower risk of dying than those who took only 4,000. Those are dramatic numbers. Those are dramatic odds ratios in basically that sort of study. But it was a large study. Nearly 5,000 participants. Large study. But enough for them to produce 2 papers on this and ongoing follow-ups. The moral of the story is this, though. Set the goal that is right for you. And that goes back to something we said earlier. Listen to your body. Listen to your body, figure out what is right, but always stay accountable to yourself. You set a goal that is right for you, you stand a chance to do the best things for you. If you set up a goal that is way too out and is a stretch goal coming right out of the get-go, you stand a chance of risk. So the best thing you could do is set a goal that makes sense and that is right for you. And if you're finding that you're making that goal all the time, then and only then you could say, all right, I'm going to up it by 25%, 50%, what have you. But again, you listen to your body. You also listen to a dietitian. You also listen to a nutritionist. You also listen to your trainer, who have you, whatever your team is. Sorry about that. Rich asks a very good question. So do I start with 4,000? Do I start with 8,000? And what I'm going to say is, where are you at right now? If you're at 2,000, then note that if you're at 4,000, you just doubled your physical activity. And there's something to be said about that. And once you have yourself at a place where you're 4,000 steps all the time, then you say, okay, I'm going to go to 6,000. Or I'll go to 7,000 or 8,000. Take your time. The answer to your question, Rich, is there's no straight answer to it. There's no bona fide answer to that. Figure out where you are right now, make a marginal sort of increase, and track it. And track it over time. And if you ever have questions about, the number of steps or right sort of physical activity or intake, you have a community here, you have me, but also a nutritionist, a dietitian is never a bad place to turn to as well. Rich also says, it's hard on my back doing too long. Yeah. Again, you got to listen to your body. Definitely listen to your body, because your body's going to tell you more times than not whether or not to continue something or stop something. So, Jamie says, dude, I feel blessed because water drinking has never been an issue for me. I love it. Yeah, water drinking is very, very important. Whether it's just straight water or carbonated water or infused water, water is definitely very important. The rule that I've been always using is 1 ounce for every 2 pounds. So if you weigh 200 pounds, then you should have 100 ounces of water a day. If you're 150 pounds, then 75 ounces. Now, there are some asterisks next to this, some footnotes. If you drink coffee, you're going to have to replenish the coffee that you drink to a certain degree. Not 1 for 1, but realize that coffee and caffeine is a diuretic. So realize what caffeine does to you and then make good on that on the amount of water that you drink on top of it. Herbal tea would also be considered water depending on whether or not it has caffeine. Decaffeinated herbal tea is okay, does count towards a water total. Any caffeinated herbal tea does not count towards a water total and needs to be looked upon as far as what could be a diuretic. So just stay true to yourself and keep an eye on it. But yes, water drinking is very much important. And Rich says, thanks, buddy. Rich, don't mention it. You're a great guy, and certainly want to see you get all the goals you're achieving for and all that, because we are all doing this here too. So we got your back, always, for sure. Let's see. One more slide, and I think this will talk about exactly where I got this sort of passion about walking within the last, I would say, 4 months. It hasn't been throughout this entire journey, but I'll say that the more that I've been noticing my steps, and the more I've been gamifying, if you will, the stepping, it's helped considerably. Using an application like Pacer or using my Apple Watch to tracking the steps and the movement and the standing every day has been very important. This has become my friend in the sense that it's keeping me honest as far as how much I'm moving. It's keeping me honest as far as how much exercise I've had. It's also keeping me honest as far as how many times a day I'm standing. And I think you pick up a stand credit if you're standing for a minute at a time every hour. So there's initial goals that are in Apple Watch, and then you can change them over time, but it definitely is incentivization for sure. And then you look at an app like Pacer, which is free. There's a paid version of it, but there's a free version of the app, and it's yet another application that tells you how many steps you've made, how many miles you've traveled, and then how much time you've been active. It's basically grabbing time from both Lose It and Apple Watch and other sources and putting it all together in one app. The fun thing about Pacer is it puts you up against other people within the world, within the country, within a certain group that you would set up. So you can have fun little competitions as far as how much you're moving, this, that, and the other thing. So 10,000 steps basically translates to nearly 5 miles or 8 kilometers, depending on step length. For some people, it will be shorter than 5 miles. For some people, it'll be longer than 5 miles. So it's depending on step length, but also the intensity of the step as well. When we're talking about walking, jogging, running, it ends up being a 60 to 75 minute workout. So if you're thinking about that sort of 75 minutes, then you're doing about 5 miles at 4 miles per hour. So 15 mile, a 4 mile per hour pace is definitely one way to go. If we go to 60 minutes to try to get to 5 miles, now you're talking about 5 miles per hour. And it ends up being something that's purely cardiovascular. You're talking about your heart rate now being in the 140s, 150s, 160s. You can figure out your max heart rate by taking 220 and subtracting it by your age. That's your theoretical max heart rate, but there's always things that can move that one way or another. But you want to talk about baseline as far as your max heart rate. Take 220, subtract it by your age, and that is what your max heart rate is. If you're finding that you're doing walks that are going uphill, that you're doing more strength training as far as your lower body is concerned, you're working your glutes and your quads and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good strength training that can be done by just moving and just walking. And as I mentioned before, there are challenges such that within Pacer and Apple Watch that often incentivize or basically cheer you on to get to 10,000 steps. Just the littlest of things can incentivize us from that. And it's not that we're looking for everything to be a competition, but hey, if I can be at 12,000 steps one day and the next day I'm at 12,500, well, that's enough motivation for me to do everything I can. Rich has a couple questions. He asks, is Pacer what you use? Yes, I use Pacer to basically track my mileage against step challenge, also a distance challenge, and then there's also 5K elements of it too. And the other question he asks is it available on Android? And it is. It's an app that's available either on iOS or both iOS and Android. Just go to your application store. You can find it, and there's a free version, but then there's also a premium version that gets you more than just step tracking, distance tracking, whatnot. But definitely an application a big fan of. There are other applications like that out there too. The beauty of the world we live in these days is having smartwatches and smartphones and having things that track our movement and track our heart rate. We're using this to our advantage. So, find an application that does that and do with it whatever you can to get to your next goal, for sure. But, we talk about the journey. We talk about where I was back in 19. We talk about where I am towards the end of 21. And just having a moment where you're just really taken back in awe on what things can happen when you keep your mind on something. And staying true to yourself. As I said before, your strength, your love, your wisdom, your health starts within first. And then we can share it to so many. And the more we build on it, the better off we become. We're not done with this topic yet. There's a little bit of a cliffhanger. There have been studies that have come out within the last couple days that have talked about obesity and the pandemic. Next Thursday, we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about two chief studies that have come out that talk about the pandemic and what it has done to obesity and how obesity can turn and raise the risk factors of the pandemic itself. So that'll be our topic next Thursday. There will not be a show on Tuesday. Tuesday I will be away. So our next venture forward is next Thursday when we talk about obesity and the pandemic. And then the topic that we're supposed to talk about tonight will air on the following Tuesday. It's all in the credits. You'll see it. But no venture forward on Tuesday. The next venture forward is next Thursday about obesity and the pandemic. But tomorrow we do the same thing we do every single Friday. And we have VF Talks with Matt Haas and Paul Burke and all of you. This venture forward VF Talks community, which I am absolutely, without question, so grateful for. Because all of you are amazing and I love all of you. You definitely are the things that keep me together in doing this show, and I would be lost without all of you. So I'm very, very appreciative and very much love all of you. Some final comments. Jamie says, JV, you rock. Jamie, I think you rock. You're phenomenal. Thank you. Rich says, JV, bless you. Bless you, Rich. And again, if you have any questions about what steps or what sort of things you need to do, just ask. Because, once you start getting things to work together, you'll find that there is nothing holding you back. So, there you go. Jamie says, love you, JV. Much love to you all. Jamie, much love to you. And Rich says, maybe I can join you Friday. Yeah, I'll have the eCam link up on top. So if you want to join us, that would be phenomenal. I would love that. And Easy says, thanks, JV. Loves you, buddy. Loves you too, Easy. Very much so. I hope you have a great Friday. But I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every venture forward and VF Talks. Stay safe. Stay sane. Stay strong. Stay sober. You're worth it. We will see you tomorrow night for VF Talks at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, right here on this channel. And I'll say the same thing to you. Have a great night. Fly be free.